I am simply overjoyed to be joined by one of the finest vocal artists of our times. She is known for having a beautiful voice, flawless technique, fantastic acting upon the stage. She hails from Washington, D.C. Her musical talents are identified early by a grammar school teacher as well as a high school teacher who encourages her to study music. She completes her studies at a Catholic University, and she begins to teach right after that, not sure what she's going to do next. And as she's completing her master's, she ends up singing an audition for Leonard Bernstein, the great legend. They are remounting a new production or redoing the production of a revival of West Side Story, and she auditions and he handpicks her to be Francisca. That's the role of Consuela in the original production. That's the character who sings Somewhere so beautifully. And so she goes on and then joins the Young Artist Program at Lyric Opera of Chicago. She wins the Met's National Council auditions in 1983. She makes her debut at the Met 4 years later in 1987 in Massonet's Manon. She begins to conquer how many other opera houses? There are countless after that. She picks up a Grammy. She even goes back to Broadway again. We'll talk about that. I am just thrilled she is here. Miss Harolyn Blackwell, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me today, Arthur. Thank you. It's a real pleasure.
Well, hey, not as big a pleasure as it is for me. And so we're talking a bit today about many things, but one of the things is that famous ballo, probably a ballo that we'll all be dead and gone. Ms. Blackwell, that ballo will remain. Back from December of 1991, Luciano Pavarotti, Leo Nucci, and the role, of course, you as Oscar. Any particular memories about that particular production, or maybe that particular live? It was live in the Met in those days before live in HD, but it was live in the Met at that time. Any particular recollections?
Well, yes, I do. It just came back to me opening night. And the first, I think it was the second, yeah, the first scene or the second scene, act one, and my hat fell off.
Uh-oh.
Somehow I picked it up, put it on my head in character. Then when I came back on stage, my sash fell off. And then I had to pick the sash up and put it on. And then in the next scene, the hat fell again. So by the third time it happened, I could hear people, and I could hear the audience starting to, snicker. And I just thought, oh my goodness, please don't let anything else come off. Now, this is not the way you want to be making your debut, especially with this particular role, which I love so much, with this production. Goodness, I came backstage and I just said to my dresser, I said, please make sure my pants are on. No matter, please make sure these pants are gonna stay up, okay? Because this is gonna be rather embarrassing. The second thing I would say is when I came up for my bow, and the audience just erupted. It was just this wall of love that was just coming from the audience, that it was just amazing.
You know, you pick up the role, you become the Oscar of your times after Roberta Peters. She was probably one of my earliest recollections. I have the old recording from Marian Anderson's debut at the Met back in '55. She is the Oscar. So she reigned in that role for 30 years. What was it like to sort of come in and sort of establish a new Oscar, if you will?
Well, what was interesting, I think because it had been so many years prior to her doing that role, and I love and adore Roberta. And so I think there were so many years in between that coming in, it was, I had the opportunity to make it new, different, and fresh. And I think what happened was also because of the director, Piero Fagioni, gave me a little tidbit about the character that literally changed my entire approach.
Ooh, can you tell us?
Yes, I will tell you. He said that when he was doing research in Sweden about King Gustavo, he had discovered that there was a little black boy in the court from the Caribbean. And I had lived in the Caribbean. And because of that little bit of information, it made me understand about how to approach the role as this free, this uninhabited character. And it made sense to me dramatically and musically why Oscar is able to get away with the things that he gets away with in this character. So watching, as I said, living in the Caribbean in St. Martin and watching kids at that age, that sense of freedom and the sense of joy and discovery about life. And so I was able to bring that into the character, that little fun, that little sparkle, that mischief. I just felt that character needed when he gave me that information.
Well, I didn't tell the audience, the first time I had the great pleasure of hearing you in person was as Oscar at Lyric Opera of Chicago. So I was born and raised in Chicago. And I remember doing your first act, Ari, with all that flourish and high notes, you were skipping along like the rail. This little thing, I thought, my gosh, it's hard enough to stay on that rail. The fact that you were singing all these high B flats and, I was like, who is this woman?
That's what happens when you do West Side Story. You learn how to do all those things.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment. I read somewhere where you really credited your time on Broadway. Opera, of course, is my first love, as many of us it is. But, acting hasn't always been the most important value. Of course, singing is so obviously so important. And so acting sometimes gets us, a back seat, which but in your case, your acting is just as great as your singing. And so do you think that came from your time in Broadway in the production?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, just doing a show, 8 shows a week. Well, I did that show for about 2 years. And so you get to discover so much about the character night after night after night, because otherwise, 8 shows a week, 2 years, it can get rather boring. So you have to find something new to work on every night to keep it fresh, because I have to remember that this is the first time an audience is coming to see this show. So I would select some often dramatic things that would just go against the character sometimes, or really flow with the character. And also having a great director really helped me in the beginning and gave me the freedom to discover all these things. And I've been very blessed in my career to have really worked with wonderful, wonderful directors. I mean, to work with Jerry Friedman and to work with Jerome Robbins in the beginning of my career. And so, as I said, I just learned this doing these 8 shows a week. There's that type of opportunity to hone your crafts night after night after night.
Any particular remembrances of Pavarotti and Leo Nucci, since we're talking with Leo Nucci today as well?
Oh, wow. I love them both. I mean, it was a great cast, a great cast with Luciano, Leo, with Aprile, with also with Florence Vivar. Luciano, being on stage every night with him was a lesson. A vocal lesson every night. And I would just sit there in amazement, just thinking, how does he do that? How does he do that? Listen, learn, with the language, with the phrasing, with the technique. And also, it was just so much fun. I think the role of Gustavo was really one of his favorite roles, because he was just like a big kid on stage at times. Wow. And so much fun. And Leo, I mean, he was menacing. I mean,
especially in that last scene, of course, and when you come to bring the invitation to the house in that scene, he's scary.
I mean, absolutely scary. I mean, the first time I just thought, oh, okay, I will be prepared the next time when I'm doing this during rehearsal on stage. But that's the great thing about practicing, right? But both of them, and also with him, it was an opportunity to really again listen and learn about technique, about the phrasing, about the language, the importance of the language and putting that all together. I just felt so honored to be on stage with each and every person. Also, they've done their roles for years upon years. So this might have been my fifth production of singing Oscar, but it was a great opportunity to really see how, when I first worked on this role, and how it grew from production to production to production. So, if I could say something to young artists, give yourself the opportunity to do a role as many times as you possibly can before you arrive to someplace like the Metropolitan Opera or the Chicago Lyric Opera, because I had done it in Hamburg, I'd done it in concert before I even did it at the Lyric Opera. You want to have some place really small where you can make those little mistakes before you get to the big houses.
I was watching an interview with Martina Arroyo a few years back, and she said, the Met is not the place to make your mistakes. Do that elsewhere.
No, I'm with Martina 100%.
So a few weeks ago, we had the great pleasure of speaking with Leona Mitchell, and we talked about that time in her career when she decided to sort of move into the more dramatic, the fuller lyric parts. And so by the 90s, you begin to sort of leave the soubrette roles and you start to take on the lyric roles yourself. How does that happen? Do you just say, I think I'm ready to work on this? Does a teacher or an advisor say, time for you to move to maybe a conductor? How do you make that decision? Because you started doing Lucia's, Gilda's, that sort of thing.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I could feel that I wanted to move more into the bel canto repertoire because of the character. I mean, I love the soubrette roles, but I could feel that I was growing into another direction dramatically. And I wanted to show people that there was another side of me. So part of it was a dramatic reason, but also you can have the dramatic reason, but if vocally you aren't ready, then it's not going to mesh. So luckily, by the time I could feel that I wanted to move into this repertoire, that vocally things were starting to happen as well. And I'm forever grateful to really Spade Jenkins for giving me the opportunity to make that transition. I think, and what happens, often people see things in you that you realize that aren't quite there. So Spade really gave me the opportunity to switch into that repertoire. I remember early in my career that a lot of people were pushing me towards Lucia. And again, I wasn't quite feeling ready. And so I had lunch with Anna Moffo. And I said, Anna, I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to be really honest with me. I said, my manager and certain people are pushing me into singing Lucia, and I don't quite feel that I'm ready yet. And I said, what do you think? And I'll never forget this as long as I live. She said, you have to make sure that you are ready for Act 2, because Act 2 it's really more lyric. And you've got to be able to cut over that orchestra and all those men around you. The voice has to be a really strong middle voice. You have to have a very strong middle voice for that second act. She said, it's not 1 and 3, but it's the second act. Boy, when I got up on that stage, I went, thank you, Anna.
Wow.
So, I mean, this is a great thing of having mentors, of sitting down with Anna, or when I did Oscar for the first time, I went to Hamburg and I studied that role with Riri.
Yes. Wow. You mentioned Riri Grist. Riri Grist was the first Oscar I ever heard on recording, a Leontine Price recording on RCA back in 1967, I believe it was. Price, Bergonzi, Robert Merrill, Shirley Verrett was Ulrika, and of course, Riri Grist. And so fabulous. And what a connection, because she also originated the role of Consuela for West Side Story. So you had the same role. So you ladies must have had a real connection, I imagine, huh?
Well, yes, we do. I mean, it's interesting. When I auditioned for West Side Story, I remember coming back and saying to my voice teacher, well, I'm studying Maria and I'm singing the song Somewhere. And I was upset because, of course, I didn't get the role of Maria. And she looked at me and she said, do you know who sang Somewhere? I said, no. She said, Riri Grist, go and do your homework. I did my homework.
Wow.
And so to follow in Riri's steps,
Mhm.
and our careers basically were modeled the same. So I remember Bernstein saying to me right after singing somewhere, he said, the next thing you should learn is the Mahler Fourth Symphony. Oh, okay. I picked up the music and learned the Mahler Fourth Symphony. Riri had done the Mahler Fourth Symphony.
So one of the issues that's very big right now in opera, which I'm thrilled about, diversity, equity, and inclusion, opportunities for artists of color. You were at the Met at a time, and Lyric and all these other, San Francisco, all these wonderful places where there weren't as many artists of color, and you were kind of in a very elite group. What do you make of this sort of I don't want to say a push, but this sort of issue that's really people are really starting to wake up to and be more aware of and sensitive to than perhaps, I don't know, maybe in a previous period? Or maybe you have some insight about that.
Well, I have to say, when I was at the Met, there was Leona Mitchell, Kathleen Battle, Myra Merritt, Florence Quivar, uh, who am I forgetting? Hilda Harris.
Mm.
There were so many Black artists then. Vincent Cole.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Simon Estes. So I came in a period where there were a lot of Black artists at the Met. And I can't remember which year it was, but I was in the production of Le Nozze, and we made history that night. On stage was Barbara Hendricks singing Susanna, Hilda Harris singing Cherubino, Robert Alexander
Ah, yes.
Robert Alexander singing the Countess, and I was singing Barbarina. I don't think in the history of the Met, even today, that there were 4 African-American female leads in a production. In that period, there were a lot of us performing. I think it started to dwindle a little bit, and now there has to be a resurgence. There have been so many amazing singers since I've been there, and the next generation of singers. It's great to see that the awareness that we've got to have more diversity, and the diversity is on the stage. But what we're now saying is that the diversity has to happen from the top down. Right. I want to walk into a theater, as someone said, how many African-American conductors have I worked with? Mm. How many African-American administrators? How, in the respect of running a company? Yeah. How many African-American stage managers? How many African-American makeup artists? So the structure, I'm a firm believer that it starts from the top and it trickles down.
Can you tell us about a project that you're working on, about a famed singer of the past?
Yes. Again, the great honor of working with the late Jesse Norman and my other colleague, Adina Williams, on a project that's been very dear to us for the last couple of years, based on the life of Cissy Retta Jones. And she was the prominent African-American opera singer of her generation. She was the first African-American female to sing at Carnegie Hall. But the preeminent opera singer of that period was Adelina Patti. And she was referred to as the Black Patti. So this was how they promoted her.
Yes.
But she, in her own right, as I understand it, unfortunately, we do not have a recording. This is only from, reading about her, had this amazing voice where it literally was from this beautiful, warm bottom that just sailed to the top. And looking at her repertoire, she sang a great deal of bel canto repertoire. But she was a brilliant, brilliant businesswoman as well. Mm. And there's part of me that thinks that her voice is probably a little bit of similar to Jesse's voice. But you know, Jesse just has this beautiful, beautiful warmth in the bottom, and then you just would just go to the top, and you just sit there and go, "Oh my God, that voice has just come from the earth and it's gone to the heavens."
Wow.
So the reason why we wanted to shine light on Ciceretta Jones, because really, if there wasn't Ciceretta Jones, there would have been a Marian Anderson.
Mm.
As a matter of fact, I just read recently that the year Marian Anderson made her European debut was the year that Ciceretta Jones passed away as a pauper.
Oh no.
No one knew about her career anymore. So we are saying, and this is the title that Jesse chose. Ciceretta Jones, call her by her name.
I love it.
Don't you love it? She's not the Black Patty.
Wow. This is important because, you know, so often history has been denied and we've got to go back and tell these stories and reclaim its place. So this
Absolutely.
is fantastic.
And that's what we plan to do.
Well, Miss Harolyn Blackwell, I'm over the moon. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Arthur. I can't believe it's taken us all these years to find one another.
Oh, but it's happened.